Picture a living room, 1975. The dinner dishes are done, dad's in his chair, mom's on the sofa, the kids are finishing homework, and at 6:30 the television comes on, not because anyone chose it, because it was time. The evening news was not entertainment, it was a ritual. A shared moment when an entire family, an entire country, received the same information from the same anchor with the same professional commitment to getting the facts right before opening their mouth. In the 1970s, Gallup polling found that between 68 and 72% of Americans said they trusted the news to report fully, accurately, and fairly. Tonight, that number is 28%. And in the fall of 2025, for the first time in 50 years of tracking, it fell below 30. Something happened between that living room and your phone screen. And as a paralegal, I want to tell you what I have learned to say when something changed that dramatically over that long a period of time. Read the paperwork. Tonight on Words with Wentz, we are going to read it together. The federal rule that once required balance. The FCC order that killed it with a date. The law that let 5 companies buy the anchor desks. The SEC filings that show exactly who owns them today. And the question that your news feed raises but never answers. Nobody stole your news, they filed the paperwork. Let's read it. The broadcasters that baby boomers grew up with shared something that is worth naming precisely, because naming it tells you exactly what has been lost. They investigated before they spoke. Walter Cronkite anchored the CBS Evening News for 19 years. When he returned from Vietnam in 1968 and told the American public that the war was a stalemate, not a victory, President Lyndon Johnson reportedly said if he had lost Cronkite, he had lost Middle America. That was the weight of a single trusted voice backed by documented reporting. Peter Jennings anchored ABC World News Tonight for over 2 decades. He was known for staying on air through the night during breaking news, not to fill time, but because the story demanded it. Dan Rather, Mike Wallace, Ted Koppel, Barbara Walters. Each one built a reputation over decades on a single foundation. They asked the hard questions, and they did not stop asking until they got an answer or a documented reason why there wasn't one. Paul Harvey, a different format, radio, reaching 24 million listeners, understood that what you left out was as important as what you put in. The Society of Professional Journalists has maintained a code of ethics since 1926, revised most recently in 2014, committing its signatories to seeking truth, minimizing harm, acting independently, and being accountable. That code existed. Those journalists honored it, and in the 1970s, more than 2/3 of Americans knew it. One chart, 50 years, one direction, something changed, and it is documented. In 1949, the Federal Communications Commission issued a document called the Report on Editorializing by Broadcast Licensees. The FCC's argument was straightforward. The broadcast spectrum is a public trust. The number of available channels is limited. If a company wants to use that spectrum, if it wants a broadcast license, it must serve the public interest. And serving the public interest means covering controversial public issues and presenting contrasting views. That was the Fairness Doctrine. Not a law passed by Congress, a binding policy requirement from the agency that controlled broadcast licenses. You want to broadcast, you must be fair. In 1987, the FCC repealed it. The decision was called the Syracuse Peace Council Memorandum Opinion and Order. 2 FCC Record 54-3. The FCC's stated reasoning, the doctrine was actually chilling speech because broadcasters were avoiding controversial topics entirely to avoid compliance obligations. In 2011, the rule's language was formally removed from the books. Within 1 year of the 1987 repeal, national partisan talk radio launched into the vacuum. Rush Limbaugh went national in 1988. The format that followed was not an accident. It was a business model filling a regulatory gap. Here is what I want you to notice. The equal time provision, 47 United States Code, Section 315, still exists. It requires broadcasters to give equal opportunity to candidates for public office. Balance for politicians survived. Balance for ideas did not. The difference between those two outcomes is not a coincidence. It is a paper trail. In 1996, Congress passed the Telecommunications Act, Public Law 104. That legislation relaxed the ownership caps that had previously limited how many broadcast stations a single company could own. The consolidation that followed is documented in SEC filings available to any American right now on the SEC Edgar database. Let me read you what those filings show. NBC News, owned by NBC Universal, a subsidiary of Comcast Corporation. ABC News, owned by the Walt Disney Company. CBS News, owned by Paramount Skydance. CNN, owned by Warner Brothers Discovery. Fox News, owned by Fox Corporation. 5 parent companies, 5 national news desks. The proxy statements for each of these companies show that the largest shareholders are institutional index funds, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, holding on behalf of millions of ordinary retirement account investors. And while this episode is airing, this is happening right now. In April 2026, Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders approved an approximately $111 billion acquisition by Paramount Skydance. The Department of Justice cleared the deal in June 2026. Closing expected later this year. If that merger closes, and we report only what the SEC filing shows as of script lock, CBS and CNN answer to the same parent company. 5 desks become 4. The desk is not owned by a person or a creed, it is owned by a business model. And the business keeps getting smaller at the top. We report what the filing says. I want you to picture a different family tonight. 2026, both parents working, kids doing homework, sports practice, dinner to make. Nobody has time to read a newspaper. Nobody has time to fact-check a headline. You turn on the news for 20 minutes while you cook, and the anchor tells you a man named Tyler is guilty of a crime. You change the channel. Same story, same framing, same conclusion. You check your phone. Your feed says the same thing, because the algorithm learned what you watch and your neighbor watches and your coworker watches, and it serves all of you the same confirmation. Nobody in that house has a different source. Nobody has the time or the tools to find one. And the thing is, the anchor might be right or they might be wrong, but you have no way to know because every channel you have access to is saying the same thing in the same tone with the same certainty. That is the echo chamber. Not a conspiracy, a documented economic outcome. Cable news faced a problem the evening news did not. It had to fill 24 hours, and the cheapest way to fill 24 hours is not reporting. Reporting requires journalists, researchers, travel, and time. The cheapest way is panels, punditry, opinion formatted to look like news. In 2018, Pew Research Center found that only about 1 in 4 American adults could correctly identify all 5 opinion statements in a set of news content. The problem was not the audience. The labeling was inadequate. Opinion and news were being presented in formats that looked identical. The FCC does maintain a broadcast news distortion policy, a standard that prohibits willful falsification, but it is nearly never enforced. Its bar is high. So here is where we are. The Fairness Doctrine died in 1987. The distortion policy is effectively unenforced, and the busy family in that kitchen has no way to know what they are watching is opinion, because it is packaged to look exactly like the news their parents trusted. Reporters Without Borders, the organization that publishes the World Press Freedom Index, ranks North Korea last, at the very bottom. The reason is straightforward. In North Korea, there is effectively one channel, one authorized version of events. A child raised with access only to that channel does not know they are receiving a curated reality. They believe what the single channel tells them, because they have no frame of reference that would allow them to question it. Now, I want you to turn that thought experiment home, not to say America is North Korea. It is not. But to ask a specific, honest question. If you are a younger American, and increasing numbers of them are, and you receive all of your news from a single platform's algorithm, optimized to show you content you are most likely to engage with, how many channels do you really have? The algorithm does not show you what is true. It shows you what keeps you watching. And what keeps you watching is usually what confirms what you already believe, or what outrages you enough to share it. Podcasts and independent digital journalism rebuilt something important, the direct line between a creator and an audience without a network parent. That matters. But the new model has its own version of the bias problem, funding. The FTC's endorsement guidelines, 16 CFR Part 255, require disclosure when a sponsor relationship exists. Whether those requirements are consistently followed is a documented question worth asking before you trust any source, old or new. The question I hear most often when we cover this territory is, do we burn it down? If the institutions are this broken, do we just walk away and start over? My answer, as a paralegal who has spent years reading public documents, is no. Not because the problems are not real. This episode has documented them, but because the tools to address them already exist and they are free. The First Amendment protects you, not just the press. The freedom of speech and press enshrined in the Constitution belongs to the citizen reader as much as to any newsroom. It is your right to seek information, to share it, and to hold the press accountable for what it publishes. The Freedom of Information Act, 5 United States Code, Section 552, gives you a legal mechanism to request government records that agencies would prefer to keep quiet. The documents we discuss tonight, FCC orders, SEC filings, congressional statutes, all of them are public. None require a law degree to access. SEC Edgar is a free website. FCC records are free. Court records are public. The busy family in that kitchen, the one with 20 minutes and a screen full of identical headlines, deserves better tools, and the tools exist. Ask a second question before you share a story. Check the SEC filing before you trust the ownership narrative. Look up the FCC docket before you accept that a rule never existed. Read the primary source. Walter Cronkite closed every broadcast the same way. Not with an opinion, not with a take, with a fact, and that's the way it is. That standard still exists. It lives in the SPJ Code of Ethics. It lives in FOIA. It lives in every public document this channel references every single week. The fix is not a new network. The fix is a nation of people who read. The documents are in the description. This is Words with Wentz. Know your rights.
Let the signal cut through the noise. Reading between the lines. Every story leaves a trace, unlocking time and space, finding truth with Wentz. Words with Wentz.